but I've got a couple hours of material on here, so I'm going to try to condense it all back down and go through it. I deleted a few slides out. I'm just not sure how many I deleted out. And if you have any questions, just say, hey, raise your hand, ask me, we'll go from there. Okay, where did that go? Does anybody know what this is? Has anybody ever seen this before?
Blurry.
Blurry? Man, it's nice and crisp on my screen here.
It's the sign of the cross.
This is laminin. This is the glue that holds everything together in the human body. So it's just kind of a neat little thing that when they break all these down, this is what they look like. There's millions of these things in the body. Does this look familiar? Man, I felt like this today. But this is everything that takes place in the body. Have you ever heard the saying, it's all in your head? It pretty much is all in your head. This is a video that I want to show you if it'll pull up here. Whoa, where did that go? This is about a 3.5 minute video. And can you guys hear that? I guess it really doesn't matter. It's not so much. You can just kind of read it as it goes along. These are water molecules underneath an electron microscope after they've had words spoken over them or had prayers done over them. And the research has come out of Japan. Well, that was good. I guess their internet connection is running a little slow here. So you can kind of see how negative thinking really impacts your body, how disorganized the water molecules were after you had really bad thoughts, and how structured they were when you had really good thoughts. And ideally, structured water is the best water to get inside the cells. Structured water has 6-cage ring configurations. It goes right through what they call aquaporin channels in the body. So if you ever come across structured water, get some, try it out, and see what you think about it. This is something I used to tell patients 15 years ago when I worked on a lot of professional bodybuilders. They could kind of get this: until the pain of remaining the same hurts more than the pain of change, people will choose to remain the same. And I've come across a lot of people that even though they get into a lot of pain, they still don't want to change. That they would rather live in their experiences in life. So you have to take a look at a negative experience. There's always a positive outcome that's far greater than the pain you'll go through. That one's a hard one to grasp at times, but you always have to try to find the silver lining. Your mind, 10 quadrillion functions per second. And the one thing is, your mind can't distinguish between what's real, what a nightmare is, the placebo effect on knee surgery. I'm going to talk about this a little bit later because this was a study done in England and it was very fascinating. Elite athletes with muscle firing, they've hooked elite athletes up and just had them go through their workout regimen, and it fired every single muscle in their workout process. So it's kind of like what happens when you want to buy a car. You start seeing that car everywhere. This one really disturbed me right here. 8,000 simulated murders is what a child sees growing up watching TV. That's even before he hits his teenage years. So your thoughts are either life-enhancing or they're disease-producing. Now, disease is a state that takes place before disease actually sets in. So kind of see where you are on that scale with your thought processes. How often do you have negative thoughts versus positive thoughts? And our thoughts create us. Most people believe that situations cause us anxiety and stress, cause us to be depressed, but there's no situation in the world that can absolutely do that to you. Everything takes place in your mind. I put an example up there on parachuting. One person absolutely loves to go parachuting, and it'll terrify the other person. What's the difference? It's just the perception in the mind. So your thoughts will control your life. Average person has 30 to 60,000 thoughts a day. And it kind of goes with words. Men on average speak about 1,500 words a day, and women speak about 6,000 words a day. And fear releases 1,400 physical and chemical responses. It activates over 30 different hormones in the body. I'm going to be talking about what engrams are here in a little bit and how it impacts the hypothalamus and pituitary with the hormones. So how many of you go through these scenarios? You start worrying about things. They haven't even come to pass yet. Or if you're in school, you get called up to the principal's office. All day you sit there and think, oh my gosh, what did I do? So in turn, you release a lot of adrenaline out into the system, and cortisol's got to it has to put the brakes on it, but I'll talk about the cortisol impact in a little bit. This came straight off the Mayo Clinic's website. I decided to look up some mainstream stuff to see if they actually had anything out there. So this was a snapshot of Mayo Clinic on the health benefits of positive thinking. They talk about increasing lifespan, lowers level of distress, better psychological and physical well-being. And this came from WebMD, talking about up to 90% of all visits to doctor's office are stress-related, cost $300 billion a year, and 98% of all degenerative disease is caused by stress. Now the engram, this is one area that I play with, are engrams. Years ago, several years back, when you talk to the medical community about this, they really scoffed at engrams. So they're now in Guyton's physiology book, and I just happened to Google Wikipedia a couple months ago, and it's even in Wikipedia. Now, an engram, it's a stored image, and I describe it to patients. Like if we were in a relationship and I got mad at you and I slapped you, and then I did the "I'm sorry, please forgive me, I didn't mean to do that." Okay, still love you. Smack again. 6 months, a year could go by, and one day you're like, "I've had enough of this, I'm out of this relationship." When you learn the lesson, you forgive yourself and forgive the other person, you're not going to be repeating the same things over again. Because life is about learning lessons. 6 months, 2 years later, a different person comes into your life, you fall madly in love with each other. He wants to reach up and say how lovely and beautiful you are, takes his hand and does this right up to your face, and you jerk your head back real fast. That's an engram response, because it took a picture and it took a sound bite of that, so when it saw that picture coming up, it just reacted. Positive ones are the same way. I'm your little boy going to town on the wall with the crayons over here, and you have two choices. You either say, "Wow, son, that's beautiful. Let's sit down and talk about this." Most people don't go with that option. It's usually, "What are you doing?" You might get a spanking. You might get yelled at. I could have been drawing mom or dad over here, just saying how much I love them, and I just took a knife in the back. So that imprints in the amygdala, the hypothalamus. It can imprint at the cellular level in a shoulder or a knee. That's why a lot of times chronic pains can be tied into subconscious emotional memory override. It's actually called SEMO. And so when you start having deals with SEMO going, that's taking place, it's putting the body into a position of, I can either survive or I can heal, but it can't do both effectively. And that's where a lot of people get caught back in the past, where chronic pain comes into play, because the subconscious mind is still reeling over with what happened 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 30 years ago. So you're not going to be able to completely heal. And one of the techniques that I do with this is find the emotion that's locked into it, hold certain eye points and positions, have you think about that, and it'll actually update the subconscious memory. So it brings the body's physiology back into present time. And that's what engrams are all about. Mm-hmm. It starts accessing same pathways. It's like EFT. They start accessing right, left brain hemispheres to pull that back, because when you go through the emotional trauma, the right brain really kind of does this, so you get a separation of the communication between right and left brain function. So the rapid eye movement is another form of being able to do that. That's where some of these things that I'll talk about at the end that you can do to start working on updating some of these emotional traumas or trying to break old patterns. That is one. It doesn't work for everybody, but it does phenomenal for a lot of people, just like some of the EFT. Phenomenal for a lot of people, doesn't work for everybody. I wished everybody would respond, to the same thing, but everybody's so individual. The I haves, you've got to stop affirming the condition is yours. You've got to stop owning it. Instead of saying my headache, rather say the headache I'm experiencing right now. Start playing with words, because you got to call into existence that which is not as though it were. So this helps recalibrate your brain. Even though you're thinking bad, "Oh God, this knee's hurting so bad," just say, "No, I am doing great. This knee is healed," and just keep speaking positivity into it. Threw this one up there for how was your day. It's a good thing to just kind of go through and take a look at on occasion, especially if you start getting angry, start finding things you can be joyful about. This one I've come across a few times with myself. What about music? This was kind of interesting. MRI and PET scans reveal that when you listen to music that excites you, your brain releases dopamine. So dopamine is a very good thing. It helps you focus, helps you with motivation. So the more great things you can do, it'll increase your dopamine. So if you're having a bad day, go find some music that you really love and start listening to it, because it will start changing your neurotransmitter activity. Now, what kind of music? I put this one in here because I came across this Lady Gaga song. And when I was doing this, I had a couple of kids, when I was showing this down, I think it was in Grapevine, and they're like, God, I love this song. And it's like, can you imagine just sitting there singing this thing, repeating this over and over when you're a teenager? I want your drama, I want your disease, I want your bad, bad romance. What do you think they're going to be pulling into their life? So things can be uplifting to your health or detrimental to it. So what you think about is what you bring about. Unforgiveness and fear. This has got to be the biggest issue today affecting health. Unforgiveness, it can bind you to a disease through anger and bitterness. And you've got to learn to forgive from your heart. I've got a process at the end of this that'll show you this. But this is one of the biggest things that neuropsycho... there's one other word that goes with it. There's a branch of doctors out in the South and on the East Coast that are getting into this branch of medicine. And they're starting to really look into the neural pathways now of people with anger and bitterness and how it's affecting the human body. So the research is really cool that they're starting to put out. Fear is the big thing. How many of you go through money, what people think about you, how am I dressed, how does my hair look? And this one right here, fear and anxiety. This is a great example of an engram coming in. So you have a big shark coming at you, you get that stress response, but now that shark's gone and you're out there just kind of swimming around today. What's running through your mind? Is that big bad shark going to come get me today or not? And this is where it constantly fires off the pituitary gland and cortisol in the body. So your body creates toxic chemicals whenever you stress. That's what creates a lot of degeneration and stagnation. Stress disables the immune system. Makes you more susceptible to germs in the environment. Had a bunch of research, but I didn't put it up here on that. But if anybody wants research on it, I can pull it up for you. Stress shrinks the brain networks. This is before and after. These are neurons in the brain with the dendrites. So when you're running along fine and healthy and happy, that's the normal side. So they retook the same person right here when they became under great stress. Look what it did to the neurons, dendrites. Man, everything just shrunk up really fast on this person. So imagine this shrinking up really fast like this, how you lose a lot of cognitive function, memory recall. It just goes away. Now, this is a big guy right here. The stress response. All this loop in here, this is one of the biggest factors right here, this nucleic factor kappa beta pathway. That is like the mothership that governs all of the inflammatory pathways, the cytokines, leukotrienes, prostaglandins. Gluten activates that pathway. Dairy activates that pathway. That's why people really need to be gluten and dairy free, just because of that one pathway right there. So that's where people, when they eat gluten a lot of times and they get off of it, they're like, wow, my shoulder pain went away, my neck pain went away, my knee pain went away, my cloudy thinking went away. So as stress comes in, you kind of see where it goes down to the adrenal glands to cortisol. And guess what? Cortisol activates the nucleic factor kappa beta pathway. And as cortisol continually comes out, it just bathes the brain. And cortisol is very damaging to what they call glial cells in the brain, and that's in the hippocampal region of the brain. Has a lot to do with short-term memory, has a lot to do with your brain farts. So if you're starting to think about things, oh, where was I going with that? That is the earliest stage of dementia and Alzheimer's starting to set in place. So you really want to start addressing that factor if it's starting to happen. There's particular bioflavonoids out there that will dampen that response. Phosphatidylserine at over 360 milligrams a day will dampen that response down. It'll protect the glial cells in the brain, but you've got to get it over 360 milligrams or it's not going to be doing any good. You get a stimulation of the vagus nerve, which revs up the sympathetic system. From there, that's where you can get into your chronic constipation issues, and that's where a lot of women have big problems. There's a technique you can do to work on the vagus nerve. You can gargle. You can sing really loud in the shower. That helps stimulate the vagus nerve. You can work on your gag reflex. You can take a knife or a spoon and you can actually stick it back and just try to work on gagging yourself. That will actually stimulate the vagus nerve. There's another theory on the vagus nerve with severe constipation to see if it's a stress response. Go get a nicotine patch, put it over your ileocecal valve, which is about right here. Leave it there and see if you end up going to the bathroom or not. And if you do, it shows that you've got a vagal nerve response from stress somewhere taking place in the body.
On the last slide, once that neuron, yes, there, once it's stressed like this, does it come back to normal? Almost back to normal?
If you stay under a constant state of stress, it stays like this. The way the brain, when you go to sleep at night, the reason you need good quality sleep at night and try to keep the stress at a minimum and just do whatever you need to do to get stressed out, the brain actually shrinks at night. And that's how it drains lymphatically wise. It's the only system in the body where the lymphatics drain outside of vessels. They go on the outside, where everything else, down here goes through. But the brain, everything comes down. So that's why it's really important to get sleep and where you can't keep waking up over and over and over again, because that allows the brain to go, oh, now I can drain. And so if you can drain all the waste out of there, that helps take pressure off that too, and it helps rebuild. Because you can actually rebuild stem cells in the brain and neural networks. You can keep extending them out. You can do that through ketosis, but you don't want to stay in it long term because it's not a great place to stay. Some people think, oh, I'll just live in a state of ketosis the rest of my life. It's like, yeah, you really don't want to do that. But yeah, that's why the phosphatidylserine really helps with those, especially if you're under a lot of stress, and feed the adrenal glands, do some adaptogenic herbs and things of that nature. But there's a deal in here. I don't know if I have it in this slide or if it's in another PowerPoint presentation, but they take the actual dendrites of these things and they've compared them to teenagers. Even though teenagers have 4 times the amount, they walk around in a comatose state. It's just like, okay. And they've taken 80-year-old professors, and it's like the neuron difference, huge, but yet the cognitive function is great, because what they're finding is these dendrites can still keep penetrating deep and just growing with what you still have left. That's why it's real important to do like crossword puzzles or Sudoku as you get older, because it'll keep the brain firing up. There's an app that's really good called OKN Strips. It's on Apple. It's like $2. And it's just red and white lines. And you just stare at the screen, and the red, white lines go this way, then they go this way, then they go this way. And it's another way to nourish the brain, and it keeps the brain younger. But some people, if they start out too quick, the brain will get really fatigued. And that's just a sign of degeneration is there.
What's it called? Okay, what?
OKN Strips. It's just OK, the letter N, and then strips. You'll find it in, it only works on iPods or iPads. iPhones, yes. It's the only thing. They don't have one for Androids or for the Mac or for the PCs yet. I don't know why they don't develop it, but it seems like it would be easy to do. But it's a really great brain exercise, and it's just something that you could do for 2 minutes. It's like, okay, let me pull it up. Okay, boom, 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 got it with that. But yes, these things, that's why you got to get the cortisol load down and the stress down. Now the mitochondria. This guy is majorly important right here. Mitochondria, what they're starting to find now, is one of the biggest reasons cancer comes back now. Because you go through treatments, but you never rebuild the foundation back up. And so they're starting to find links into weak mitochondrial pathways now post-cancer treatment for the people that 2, 3, 4 years later come back. It's like, wow, you know, it's not in remission anymore, it came back. So they're finding this is one of the big things that you really need to feed. And the mitochondria, if anybody ever does any genetic testing out there through 23andMe, there's some other sites, but there's a genetic SNPs called NDUF7s, NDUF8s, COX3s, COX5s, and SLC1, that if you have those genetic SNPs, you better pay attention to your mitochondria because they control your respiratory chain mechanisms. And what happens is if you have all those genetic SNPs, you're going to have a harder time with oxygen inside the cells in the mitochondria doing their function. They're responsible for a lot of the ATP. You're either anaerobic or you're aerobic. If you go anaerobic, you produce 1 ATP. If you're aerobic, you'll produce 18 to 21. So you better be on the side of 18 to 21. So there's good things out there like CoQ10, PQQ combinations that work really good at bolstering mitochondrial function. They've got research now with the combination of I want to say it's 200 milligrams of CoQ10 and 20 milligrams of PQQ. Somewhere around there, it might be 120, but they're finding that it's actually increasing athletic performance in old marathon runners that retired and now they're back in their 70s and 80s and they've got some of them back up running marathons again just off these combination products, getting the mitochondria really boosted. So very, very important to look at and to work on it. A lot of people never look at the mitochondrial function. Another way that you can tell that the mitochondria is going weak. I used to be able to exercise, and now when I exercise, I can't recover as fast as I used to. I'm getting more winded. I'm getting tired. It's just not working like it used to. So that's one of the signs that the mitochondria is starting to really go downhill. Nope, wrong way. So there's just some more stuff on the mitochondrial pathways about the, I talked a little bit about the genetic factors, which you can start mapping out disease trajectories, especially if you can really look at in-depth blood work and really go deep into the genetics. You can really start seeing how clotting factors take place, deep vein thrombosis takes place, cognitive brain function, you know, because there's so many markers out there now that you can look at for immune system regulation, bowel issues that you can get into, natural killer cells just through doing the genetics, and you can kind of piecemeal it all together and take a look at where do I need to really start with this stuff. But stress pounds the mitochondria big time. So I put this up there on a root of bitterness. These are some of the signs that you might see if you have some of this going on, because you should be able to see somebody and it shouldn't bug you. But a lot of people, they'll walk across the other side of the street so they don't have to see someone. And that's a sign right there that you have bitterness. And the problem with bitterness is it really hurts the gallbladder and the liver. And I'll get into some of that other stuff a little bit later. Gossiping. This was pretty neat. In order to gossip, you have to have a negative memory or thought already in your mind. Then you're going to transfer that to another person, and the chain goes on and on. So really kind of pay attention when you want to go gossip about someone or something, how that's going to impact the person you're talking to and then the person that they're going to be talking to. Because it releases cortisol. Every time you gossip, and this was off of a study, so when they got people gossiping, they were noticing huge cortisol spikes in people. So just kind of think about that the next time, because these are some of the things that cortisol does. You know, it dampens the insulin receptors. It'll shut down thyroid function, blocks the immune system. And that leads to all your weight gains and fun little things. So friends build each other up. They don't tear each other down. But the big thing is hurt people hurt people. So if you ever see people where they're really saying bad things about it, just know that they're hurting on the inside, so you might try to find ways to pick them up. And this was meditation, reverses the nucleic factor kappa beta pathways. So they took 45 dementia caregivers. They did meditation or relaxing music, 12 minutes daily for 8 weeks. 39 caregivers completed the study. Now this was fascinating. They didn't really mention anything about the relaxing music having a big impact and stuff. But in response to meditation, 68 genes were found to be differently expressed, 19 upregulated and downregulated 49. I just thought that was just a really cool study they did in 2013. Downregulated, the body does a couple different things. It can either upregulate pathways or downregulate pathways. So I'm trying to think of a good example of that, where, like if that nucleic factor kappa beta pathway is going, that means, okay, we're going to start having more and more inflammation. You get that in and get that pathway down-regulated, it's kind of like putting the brakes on it, saying, hey, let's just slow down. Now, part of the immune pathways were upregulated because the stress and the cortisol was suppressing natural killer cells, which that's what fights, your infections and cancer cells. And that system got upregulated. So that's what they were talking about on systems that got upregulated and downregulated. Does that make sense? Kind of. It put the brakes on things that were bad happening in the body. It's like, no. So it downregulated those pathways. It's kind of like if you've ever taken an aspirin for a headache. It shuts off all the prostaglandins, your good and bads. So that's kind of like an example of, no, let's just downregulate that pathway. So that way you get rid of the issue that you're having. And let's see, that just talks about the inflammatory process and the nucleic factor kappa beta that I was talking about earlier on that. This is the vicious cycle of that nucleic factor kappa beta pathway. So you can see why a lot of research has gone around this one particular pathway, how it just disrupts immune dysregulation, which when that happens, you go into loss of chemical tolerance. That leads to multiple chemical sensitivity. So how many of you can walk in a department store and smell perfumes and be absolutely fine and it doesn't bother you versus, man, I'm starting to get headaches or I get lightheaded. Now there's some genetic SNPs that play into this pathway as well. But this is the pathway that starts the whole thing that gets, the end product is all these multiple chemical sensitivities or autoimmunity or weight gain over here. So not a very good thing. And loss of cellular apoptosis. I'm going to mention that right there because it ties into cancer. This also ties right back into mitochondrial pathway function. If your mitochondria is not healthy, what happens? The cell, instead of it going like that, which is apoptosis, everything pops, the cell necroses. So that's another reason why the mitochondrial is so important to have healthy, because you want a cell to go pop instead of it necrosing in the body. And inflammation. It's at the center of everything now. That's pretty much what a lot of the doctors are coming to a conclusion is that inflammation is causing all these problems in the body. So it's tied back into everything that you're ever experiencing. And let's see, this was the College King. Is this the one with the knee thing? No, this is just one on thinking. So they went through this whole process and they started finding huge correlations to Alzheimer's disease with the stress response. And this was done just January of last year. But let's see, where was it? Okay. So you got to start feeding your soul. You got to have a healthy soil to have healthy roots. So if you have healthy roots, you'll bear good fruit. Mosquitoes don't produce swamps, people do. A lot of people think, oh no, it's like, no, what has your lifestyle been like? What have you been drinking? What have you been eating? What have you been thinking? What have you been breathing? How have you been exercising? How have you been resting? How have you been giving back to society? And this is where, if you can work on all those areas, you're going to have a good, healthy soil, so it's going to be hard for disease to set in place. Fasting and exercise. Brain uses ketones for fuel when you go into fasting. Now, I put seizures and demons up there. This was a very fascinating thing back in the days of the Roman Empire. When people started seizing, they thought that they were demonically possessed. So they would go lock them up in a dungeon. Well, they didn't feed them very much, so they went into a modified fast. And guess what? The people started thinking clearly, and it cleared everything up. So they were like, oh, okay, well, the demons are gone out of them, so they had let them back. Guess what? Boom, started the whole process over again. Wow, they just got demon possessed, and the cycle went on. That was, but now they're starting to find why this is taking place now. But it can produce new nerve cells from stem cells. That was one of the things that they found when the brain started going into ketosis. And these nerve cells then can repair your DNA. And the brain-derived neurotrophic factor, that increases in the brain. So it increases mitochondria and nerve cells as you do exercise. That's why increasing mitochondrial exercising, it'll increase. Now, one of the best ways to do exercise is burst training. And that's where you basically can, ideally, in perfect world, it would be you hit it all out for 1 minute, casually just stroll, hit it all out for 1 minute, and you just break it off in a 1 minute, in a 5-minute exercise cycle. But if you can't do that, go 30 seconds, rest 15, go 30, rest 15. And just do that. Just, 5 minutes a day is a great thing to do. And what they find, burst training will also increase your nitric oxide pathways. So it'll help open up your blood vessel pathways. And it's called they call it ENOS. It stands for endothelial. And that's very protective of the cardiovascular system. The heart is the key component to your emotional system. The heart thinks before your brain does. A lot of people think, no, it's your brain, but it's actually your heart will fire. Well, it's even a whole lot faster than that before the brain will. And so now they've been able to determine now that the heart can make decisions and demonstrate memory all on its own. It even produces hormones and neurotransmitters. It produces oxytocin, and that's your feel-good hormone. That one gives great pleasure right there. But the heart's magnetic field, this one I did not know when I started looking into the research that this institute was doing. But they measured the heart to be 500 times stronger than the brain. It can be detected several feet away from the body. And I really think a lot of this, they say it's your gut, but I really think, no, I think it's really the heart instead of that it's just that gut feeling. I really think it's the heart. And especially when people walk into the room and everything, man, with that thing going out 500 times stronger, I think that's where you kind of can sense people and feel like, ooh, I don't know if I like that. Oh, okay. That person just feels weird. Or somebody walks in, you turn around. I think that's tied into this pathway after looking at this research. Now, this is an HRV test. This test, NASA uses a lot of this technology. They're actually the one that I think created these heart rate variability tests. Your heart rate, whenever it beats, it does not beat like boom, boom, boom. It might beat ba-boom, then ba-boom, then ba-boom, boom. It has to have a variable rate because if it beat at the same firing every time, it would blow a hole in your heart. It would just get worn out. So what they did is they had this person in frustration. Look at the difference between when somebody thought about frustration versus appreciation. How it just changed everything. All your sine waves were more normal. And that's one thing that science has done now. They've mapped out the frequencies to the emotions. They have found that negative emotions carry a low vibrational erratic frequency. They found that emotions like happiness, love, joy, they carry a very high sine wave frequency, and it matches up with the heart rate variability. All cancer, parasites, and viruses, guess what? They oscillate at a very low vibrational frequency. Now, this one right here, this came from heartmath.org. You can actually, they have institutes now, and they sell these equipment to people to where you can start monitoring yourself. You can, I even think they have a leasing program that you can hook yourself up to. And what they have found on average is at the 300-second mark is when everything changes on a lot of the people that they have. So you can see the respiration, the heart rate, and the blood pressure. And what it was at the 300-second mark, these people were stressed out, and they started having them just think about grace, appreciation, calm. And at 300 seconds, you get a totally different picture of what's happening at your heart.
Dr. Russell?
Mm-hmm.
To me, this correlates totally with the water crystals, because the water crystals that are associated with peace and
Mm-hmm.
all that are smooth and all that,
Right.
ones that are discordant
Mm-hmm.
and the negative.
Yeah, that's why it's just tough. It's hard to think happy, positive thoughts in this world we live in today. You know, when you look at the bombings this morning, it's just like, oh man, that's nuts. So, food for thought, behavioral modification. I've rarely seen behavioral modification work. And if you don't know what behavioral modification is, it's like, come over here and sit on my couch and let's just talk about your problem. And you do nothing about it. So because whatever reigns and rules in your heart, man, that is going to overflow and it is going to come out of your mouth. That's why you got to change your heart to change the person you want to become. No one controls your thoughts but you. And they can be changed. Thoughts create your feelings, feelings create your behavior, and behavior reinforces your thoughts. So put positive thinking into practice. This one takes time to do. It takes about 3 weeks. It's about average to get some type of new habit put in. You know, some of them it's like, I'm so tired lately. My youth is renewed daily. You know, just think of different ways to start speaking to yourself. I can't remember a thing. No, start saying my mind is sharp, clear, and has perfect recall. Even if you don't feel that way, just start speaking it that way. That's just some more of them that I put in there. That nothing good ever happens to me. You know, it may look bad, but my future's bright. So if you find yourself in negative talk with any of these, grab a pen and paper, write it down, and then just start going, what else can I put in place of this so when I start having these thoughts again? Organs and emotions. Lungs have a lot to do with grief, sadness, and anguish. One example of this was like Christopher Reeve. When he died, his wife really, she was in severe grief. And she ended up having lung complications and died. But I find this a lot with people with, you know, where their cancer lies. And if you can start taking a look at this, I'll show you some ways here in a minute to start clearing some of this stuff up. And these are just the body parts that I put up there on some. You can kind of look at like chronic knee problems, stubborn pride, inability to bend, your spine, low spine. You know, it's kind of like why do guys always have low back problems? They're usually the financial providers, and they're usually the ones who are stressing most about money or about job or about career. Where the women, if you look at most women, they usually carry all their attention up here because they have to carry the weight of the world on their shoulders. They're the ones that that have to get everything done. So, you know, it's time to get rid of the baggage and start traveling with luggage. So if all your thinking has brought you to a place you don't like, just put another thought in your mind. So what can you do? I have my patients go to YouTube. EFT, I don't know if anybody's not familiar with EFT or not, but it stands for Emotional Freedom Technique. This was stuff put out by, I think it was Roger Callahan 50, 60 years ago. The American Psychology Board, this year they were supposed to approve it for continuing education. But that might be put on delay because the universities, credible universities, have been putting out double-blind studies on EFT over the past 3 years. And what they have found is EFT, on average, has beat cognitive behavioral therapy and medication, on average, 33% straight across the board. So if you go on YouTube, you can just type in EFT and anger, EFT and relaxation, EFT and peace, EFT and frustration, EFT and addiction. So there's pretty much, if you can think about it, the video is going to be on YouTube because there are thousands of practitioners that have their information and their videos loaded up on these things. If you don't like one, hit the back button and go pick another practitioner. And I'll show you guys how to do a what I call a neuro update exercise here in a minute. Meditation hits the gamma waves. That goes back to that research study that showed how great it was for just doing, 12, 15 minutes a day. Positive speaking is another big one. You got to control what is going through your mind. Brain HQ, I put that resource down right there because they custom tailor exercises to your personality and to your outcome, but it's a way that it will keep your brain young and firing. So you might just want to give that a shot. They have like monthly trial programs. They have yearly subscriptions to it, and that helps a lot. But this EFT goes in with your rapid eye movement stuff that you were talking about. So what can you do? Steps of forgiveness. I think I've got those on another deal right in. Well, I'll check the next slide. Let me see if I have that on there. These are the steps of forgiveness that I give patients to do. It's just something that gets them involved in the whole process because you've got to identify the emotion. Most people do not identify the emotion. They're just like, I forgave that person. You can bury that in your conscious mind because we run from the frontal cortex, we run maybe 12%. Everything else is subconscious. But a lot of people try to talk themselves saying, no, I've let it go. But so you need to identify the emotion involved, then forgive yourself, forgive the other person, ask the other person forgiveness of the harm you caused them. And you're like, wait a minute, they're the one that did this to me. I didn't do this. This goes right back to the engram thing. I don't know how many of you might have been talking to somebody and all of a sudden it's like they went off the handle or they got angry or they got moody and it's like, what happened? You probably said a word that fired an engram response in them that just pulled them right back up into a fight or flight situation. So that's why it's important to just kind of put that one in there as well. See the positive that came from the situation. You have to be thankful for the experience. The biggest thing right here, you have to do it with passion, faith, and belief. Because if there is no passion behind it, it didn't do any good. You can sit there and say, oh, yeah, okay, yeah, I see that. Yeah, forgiven. Yeah, okay, I'm good. And go about your way. So it won't work. You got to send blessings to the other person. Just wish them well. Just put it out there because they will receive it. And then just give it all over to God if you believe in God and just ask for His forgiveness. So I think that was... And minding, went back over that. You got to start thinking about what you think about when you're thinking about it. So this is a real big one because I've had a lot of patients that have come back in and they were just like, I cannot believe how many negative thoughts I had a day, and I never knew that till I started really paying attention to what I was speaking over myself or thinking. Because stinking thinking, it's going to get you in trouble. Ask friends for help breaking these patterns. That might be a little tough because sometimes your wife or your other spouse, you're just picking on me again. That's why you got to get permission with that. So neuro updating, I'll do that. Dr. Caroline Leaf, she has a book out called Switch on Your Brain and a 21-day brain detox. This lady is so smart when it comes to the inner workings of the human brain. It is one of the best books out there on just going through a whole program of just getting rid of the garbage that's in your brain. So it works really good. Francis Martin, he was I can't remember what he was, if he was an old monk. Can't remember if he was or not, but Hung by the Tongue, it's a very short book on how your words just greatly impact your body. But I'll show you the neuro-updating exercise, but I cut a lot of the slides out on this presentation because I only had an hour tonight. But if there's any questions on anything, just ask away. It can be on any subject you want. Oh, good, no questions. Wow. So who wants to see a neuro-updating exercise? Well, good. So who wants to be the guinea pig to perform it then? Well, sweet. We'll do that. This neuro-updating exercise, it will improve range of motion, flexibility, and reaction time that fast. It updates from the cerebellum down. But what they have found is when you get into this position, if you had a really bad day or you got really angry, you could start just being, I forgive myself for experiencing anger, and what they have found is it will actually update the amygdala, so it'll dump that whole process of wanting to hold everything on. So come on up here. Let's see if we can pull this off. About right there, pretty stiff?
Yeah, it's stiff in the shoulder.
Okay. And about right there?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Just kind of pay attention to that right there. What I want you to do is step forward with your left foot a couple of feet. Just there you go. Bend your left knee slightly. That's perfect. Keep this one straight now and just slightly bend. You're going to bring this arm here and this arm here and stretch it just like that. Turn your head to this side for me. Cock it back just a little bit. Bring this arm back about right there. Eyes, look right up here in the corner. Keep looking up here. Close them and keep looking up. And I'm not going to let you fall, okay? So keep looking up in the corner. I want you to take a breath in and hold as long as you can. And while you're in this, just be thankful and grateful for the abundance of health, happiness, love, joy, and success you've got in your life. Just being thankful and grateful. Okay, step back. Go forward with your right foot now. Bend the right knee slightly. This time we're going to go this way and this way. Hold those arms there. Turn your head to this side this time. Cock it back a little bit. Eyes looking up in this corner. Keep looking up. Close them. Take a breath in and hold. And just be thankful and grateful for the abundance of health, happiness, love, joy, and success, and raising forgiveness of yourself and others. So thankful. So grateful. Good. Step back. That was one set of that. Did you feel how you were a little wobbly right there? It's your vestibular system. It's kind of knocked off water right now. The more you do that, you'll be able to stand there like a rock. This is one thing that will prevent you from falling down as you get older, running into things, because our proprioception diminishes as we age, but this exercise will stop that from happening. How's that on now?
Better.
So that's one set. You want to do 3 sets of those. It takes 2 minutes to do the exercise.
You need another person to wave their fingers?
No, not at all. I just initially had to do that. When I first learned this thing, I told the patient to go home and do it. I had to fix it the next day because they fell over and hurt their hip. Because most people, when they start doing this, man, they will be just like, they'll be like this because the vestibular system is, it's basically just kind of down-regulated a little bit. It's kind of, and we want to pick it back up. So as you get better with it, you can actually do one right in front of the other like this. But you have to, one common mistake, I see this with patients, they want to do the warrior pose, and that will screw you up neurologically if you start doing this thing, holding the breath back. You've got to do this cross crawl because this is a right-left brain function, update the cerebellum. So if you forget, it's like, okay, I'm going to do an exaggerated walk. Okay, I'll walk that way. You won't go like this because then that'll mess you up neurologically. They have a research study now on all unilateral things, and there was a big thing on Hitler, how he always had his people march this way. Because they can do some different programming with the brains on unilateral exercises. So if you've got that down, just get your husband to spot you a little bit. We do 3 sets of that. Think good positive thoughts in there. Hold your breath 10 seconds, 8 seconds, 15 seconds if you want to. If you want to turn it into an exercise, you can get in that position. You just tighten up your butt cheeks, tighten up your arms, and it'll actually be like an exercise.